Wonderful. How are we all? You grab a seat, that'd be great. If you're with us, we have some basic guidelines that we do have to follow with regard to the COVID-safe structures of the government. I'm not sure whether you agree or disagree. That's not the point. The point is, as a church, for us to continue to function, there are requirements placed upon us. So if you're in the same family group, same household, under the same roof, you live together in that home, then you can sit together. But other than that, you need to be 2 chairs away from another family group or household group so that we maintain that. Because the reality is the police can come in at any time. They look after the churches in the COVID structure. So we'd encourage you to do that. After the meeting's over, we'll be heading out these side doors. Shane has a table with his product out there. He'll tell you more about that. But again, please be aware of the social distancing. Now, for us, it's physical distancing because we want to be sociable. But try and keep that distancing open and honour that because, please honour that, honour God, honour the church because that enables us to continue to maintain a good reputation for Christ in our community. So I'd love you to be aware of that. Thank you for being here. We are so privileged. Shane is a pastor and also a clinical psychologist. He's stuck in Australia because of COVID, and that'd be the worst place to be in the world would be in Australia, in Queensland, with all the things that we can do. But it also means that Shane's been able to be here with us this weekend. We're so privileged to have Shane with us. I want to give Shane a hand before we start. Welcome him here. We've already been having some great discussions on new topics, and I think Shane's in the process of producing some more material in the next month or so, and we're bouncing stuff around. I am already excited about not just the stuff he's got, but what's coming in the very near future. So I would say keep your ears to the ground, and we will also try and get Shane back later, should God give us favour in that journey. So it's great. Just really, I'm so grateful to God for his goodness and kindness toward us all. And I pray you have a heart that's ready, ears that are open to hear what the Spirit is saying, and just grab a hold of the Word of God. Let it dwell in you. You don't have to agree with everything, but let it dwell, because as it grows in you, you have a heart more and more like God. And that's what we want to be. We want to become more like Christ in everything we do. And I think one of the privileges we have is having people come in to the community who love God, who are willing to search the Scriptures and then share the revelations of God with us that challenge our thinking. So I'd encourage you right now. I'm going to have Shane come and share right now. Give him another welcome from Bundy. Thank you, Shane.
All right. So good to be here with you. If you'd like to follow an actual Bible, Genesis chapter 1. I figure it's a good place to start. We'll start in the beginning, and we're gonna journey forward. This is so good to be back here with my good friends in Bundaberg. This is one of my favorite places, one of the first places to welcome me when we first started when I was 26 years old. I'm significantly older than that now. You guys the town was one of the first people to welcome me. Pastor Darrell and Diane Dorley, who are here tonight, I really appreciate them, and they introduced me to the whole city, and thank you so much for that. So as always, we will have our table set up. There's a little bit difference. The table will be out there, and there's only going to be a couple of titles. I only got my new stuff with me since the last time I was here, so I have a 12-part series on Revelation. It's in 2 different parts, so 2 6-part series on Revelation. I've never heard such hermeneutical atrocities as what I've heard people do with the book of Revelation, particularly in this season. I found it embarrassing. I found it frankly horrible. I'm sure they were good-hearted and well-meaning, but I thought this is just frankly terrible. And so what I did was, instead of complaining about it, or instead of going on the internet and getting in public fights on the internet about it, because that's just not compelling and quite idiotic. So what I did is I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go through it and present a better narrative. And then in my observation, in my experience, the better narrative wins out without someone being mean about it, right? And so if you're interested in the book of Revelation, we have our 12-part series out there. We also have a new series I've done that we released earlier in the year on faith in troubled times, which, hand on heart, I wrote in November, right? So I wrote that in November preparing for this year, and it just so happened to fit perfect. So that's out there as well. And in the coming month or so, we're going to be releasing a new thing, a 10-part series on the nature of Christ. It's a Christology course. And we're going to be releasing a thing I did called Conversations, where in the COVID season, what happened was pastors pastors from all over ended up interviewing me. And we ended up having dialogues on stages in front of cameras for everybody to see. And so we covered every topic you could possibly imagine. Literally, I think everything I know on earth is in those conversations. And so we put those together. We're putting those together right now and editing them in such a way so you could search by topic. So anyway, all that to say, you could come out and say hello. Please do remember physical distancing, and we have a hand sanitizer thing out there to sanitize your hands before you pick up anything, and then after you pay. So that way we can be respectful to our community and just be good citizens and lead the way in what it means to treat others how we would want to be treated in those situations. And so we want to be seen in our communities as people of love and kindness and graciousness, and people who participate with the shared values of everybody. And so in that vein, if you don't know, we give all that money away. So we have 3 orphanages in China that look after children with mental disabilities, 2 in Henyang, 1 in Changsha. I'm happy to report that as of last week, not one child has gotten sick, and not one staff person there got sick. And they're 3 hours drive from Wuhan, right? So this was a bit worrisome for us. I'm also happy to report that even amongst pretty good stress around my commitment was made to them January 1st for what we could do this year. And not being able to set up a table to challenge that. But as of right now, if today's August 1st, I think, or yesterday was August 1st, whatever August 1st is, we made our full commitment today, right? So we have not missed a commitment to them. So I'm really thankful about that. About all those things, that's just the graciousness of God and the graciousness of people understanding what we do, and we were able to do those things. So I want to talk to you tonight. I get to open the Bible tonight, and I take that very seriously. So anytime I open the Bible, you want to ask a couple questions. 1, what happened? And then 2, and more importantly, what's happening in me right now because of what happened. So when I was a young person, one of the things that frustrated me about church or church people was platitudes. Now, platitude is when somebody says something that's obviously true and you can't argue about it, but if you ask one question about it, they don't know how to put language around what that means in terms of how to live. I'll give you an example of a platitude. You should be walking in the Spirit. Well, that's a platitude. Nobody can disagree with it. Nobody can say, no, we need less walking in the Spirit. Nobody can do that. But if I say, you should be walking in the Spirit, and if you ask a legitimate, authentic question about that, and you say, what's that mean? And my only answer is, well, walking in the Spirit means as you're walking, you're in the Spirit. Well, what I've admitted is that even though what I'm saying is true, I have no ability to put language around what that means for my today or tomorrow or the next day or the next day. So if I was to say, we are the body of Christ, everybody would say, yes, amen. If I was to say, you know what? The world should never be asking where is God if God's body is doing its job in the world. Everybody would go, yes, that's right. If the world's saying where is God, God's asking where's my body? Why aren't they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Nobody goes, no, we need to be less active in our world. We need to be less effective. Nobody is saying that. If I was to say, we need to be like God in our world. We need to be the presence of God in our communities and in our families and in our neighborhoods. Nobody goes, no, we need less of that. We would all go, yes, absolutely. But if we lack the language to flesh out what that might look like in our world, that could be very frustrating. So my test tonight is I want to talk about the first description of God ever recorded in the Bible and what it means for us. And the first description of God ever recorded in the Bible is that God is a creator. That God is a creator. And if we're made in the image of God, then the essence of who we are is we are creators. And once again, that's a platitude unless I put some language around what that looks like. And so what I want is Jesus to get bigger, the cross to work better, the resurrection to be central, and scriptures to get bigger, not smaller. And I want us to walk out of here equipped tonight to be better creators in our world. What does that look like? So here is the account of it. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created. First description of God is that he is a creator. First thing he did, he created. First thing he did that was recorded, he is a creator. God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth had a problem. It was without form and void. That sounds really bad. And darkness was over the face of the deep. Nothing about this is sounding nice. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the violent waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. So the first description of God in all of Scripture is a creator. Now, what does that mean? And what do we do with that? And how does that apply to us? Next slide. Here is some attempt to put some language around this. As influencers, we are called to be creators. Obviously true. Now, here's a couple things about creators. One, creators don't avoid disorder. They engage the disorder in order to make a better story of order. They don't look, what you find in Genesis 1 is God doesn't look at the disorder and say, I'm too holy to be in the middle of that. Rather, when God sees disorder, he engages it in order to bring order. I'll say it another way. Creators don't avoid chaos. They engage chaos with new creation. Here's what you find in Genesis 1, and I will make an argument that you find it throughout Scripture, and I'll make an argument that it's been true if you think about it in your life, and I'd make an argument that if you thought hard enough about somebody else, you would see that it was true in their life. That at creation, you have darkness, disorder, chaos, and disrepair. And God doesn't sit above it. God doesn't judge it. God doesn't criticize it. God doesn't sit on the internet and point out everything that's wrong with it. God doesn't do that. God doesn't proclaim he's too holy to touch it. He does the exact opposite of that. When he sees disorder, chaos, and disrepair, he engages the disorder, chaos, and disrepair in order to make a better story. See, when I was a kid, and even now, people would say something like this. I want to be clear. I'm not mad at these people because I know what they mean. Right? But here's what it sounded like. God is too holy to be in the presence of sin. God is too holy to be in the presence of sin. And once again, I know what you mean by that, but actually the truth is observably and empirically and obviously the opposite of that. I would encourage us to say it differently than that. And my encouragement would be to say, instead of saying God is too holy to be in the presence of sin, I would say it this way, that God is too holy not to engage the sin, the disorder, the darkness, and the chaos in order to get into the middle of it to make a better story. It's sort of like this. If a 4-year-old came to you and said, Mommy, Daddy, Auntie, Uncle, Cousin, whatever, I drew you a picture. And let's say a 4-year-old drew you a picture. Well, unless that 4-year-old is incredibly gifted, that picture is going to be frankly terrible, right? And so they say, look, I drew you a picture. And they hand it to you. Now, what do you do with that picture, right? It's going to be terrible. But would you ever look at the 4-year-old and go, what is this? Come back when you learn how to draw, little girl. No, you would never do that. Why? Because you have a soul, right? Here's what you would do. You would go, wow, wow, that picture's amazing. What is it? Right? So it's so amazing, you don't even know what it is. That picture's amazing. What is it? She says, oh, it's a windmill. You go, wow. Now, you don't see a windmill anywhere in there, right? You go, wow, I reckon that's the greatest windmill I've ever seen in my life. And she smiles. And then what if she hands you the crayon or the marker or whatever she used, and she says, you draw? Well, what do? Do you throw away her broken picture? No. If you've ever been to someone's house where a 4-year-old drew a picture, the worst pictures you've ever seen are found easily displayed on the refrigerator. Why? Because that's what you do, right? But if she asked you to improve the picture, what do? Do you throw her broken picture away? No. What do? You enter into her broken picture and you make it better. And then you hand it back to her so she can tell everybody, look what I did. That's what creators do. Creators engage broken stories, broken pictures, and they make a better narrative and then are kind enough to let the other people give credit or not give credit for what they did because they did it out of love, not out of duty. This is what creation is. God looked at darkness, disorder, chaos, and disrepair, and he engaged it. He didn't judge it. He didn't criticize it. He didn't declare it unworthy of his touch. No, he's like, you know what? I am too holy not to get right in the middle of that and make a better story. And if you think about your life, that's been true of your life. Even if there was moments in your life where you thought, I've done something so bad or I've created such a mess, I don't think God would touch my life. If you think about the reality of it, though, is that God was doing nothing but offering for your consent to allow him to engage your broken story, not to judge you, not to criticize you, not to make matters worse, and definitely not to shame you, but rather to get into the middle of that in order to make a better story. In other words, he's been doing it at creation, and he's been doing it in your life, and if you look around the room, he's been doing it in everybody in here's life since the foundation of the world. It's almost like it's what he's like. Listen, if you don't take away anything from what I say tonight, come back in now and hear me now. What seems to be the truth, with one or two rare yet obvious exceptions, is this: that God seems to meet people where they think he is and then move them step by step by step by step along. That God does not hit humanity with these sudden, huge, full revelations of who he is and then demand them to shift. God seems to meet people where they think he is and then move them step by step by step. The one obvious exception to that was Paul, and I think there was some reasons for that. Like Paul thought he was serving God, and then God sort of reveals, you're not serving me, you're persecuting me, and there was this whole radical encounter. But in general, that's not the case. In general, God meets people where they think he is. Let me give you an example. So Abraham lived in a world where they thought you had to kill children to please God. It was called ancient Sumeria. In ancient Sumeria, they thought you had to kill children in order to appease God. So God shows up in that situation and he says, you think you need to kill kids? Fine, kill your kid. But then he doesn't leave it there. He engages Abraham where Abraham thought God was. And he says, you think you need to kill kids to please me? Fine, kill your kid. But then he meets Abraham right there and he comes up with a radical new idea. And that is this: hey, I got an idea. Instead of killing kids, let's kill animals instead. Brilliant. When you're the first person to get the idea, let's kill animals instead of children, that's a good idea, not a bad idea. God met Abraham right where Abraham thought he was, but he never left him there. He moved the world forward. Same thing with Moses. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's household, and in Pharaoh's household, the son was God. The son was called Ra, and the son was God. So in Moses' world, God was a fire, and it's a fire that if you tick it off, it will consume you. God was a consuming fire. So Moses is out in the middle of the wilderness, and God chooses to meet Moses. And since Moses thought God was a fire, how does God meet Moses? As a fire. But a different sort of fire, a fire that doesn't even burn up the most flammable bush in the desert. It was a different sort of fire. As the great T.S. Eliot wrote, we only sustain, only suspire, consumed by either fire or fire, that you will live your whole life tormented by fear of the consuming fire of the sun god Ra, or by faith, you will put your faith in the loving Yahweh, who although he will perfect you, he will never harm you, for the bush was not consumed. Now that is eloquent, right? So in other words, God meets Abraham where Abraham thought he was, in the middle of his disorder, in the middle of his disrepair, in the middle of this thing, and instead of leaving him there, he makes a better story. God meets Moses. He says, you think I'm a fire? I'll be a fire, but I'm going to change the way you think about how fire operates. I'm not a consuming fire. I'm a refining fire, who although I'll perfect you, I'll never harm you, because the bush was not consumed. Years later, there's a guy named Jesus that comes along. And in Jesus' world, they thought Caesar was God. Finally, the world was in a place where they believed God could exist in a man. And so God says, great. You think I can be in a man? I'll come as a man, but I'll turn it upside down what you think God would be like. If God was actually a man, he wouldn't be raping, pillaging, and oppressing 99% of the world for the sake of the 1%. He'd be lifting the lowly to the level of the elite. He'd be ending the class systems. There wouldn't be male nor female, Jew nor Greek, slave nor free. You couldn't treat black people worse than white people. You couldn't treat women worse than men. Why? Because Christ is the ground of being, holding all things together. God met the world where the world thought God was, and then turned it upside down, moving us this to this to this to this to this. In other words, what do creators do? Creators don't declare themselves above the problem. When creators see a problem, they don't go on the internet and spout off ridiculous criticisms with no commitment to be a part of the solution. That's not what creators do. Creators don't sit above it and self-righteously judge it. That's not what creators do. Creators didn't do. God, the one who has the right to do that, didn't do that. What a real creator, full of the Spirit of God, does is when they see darkness, disorder, disrepair, and chaos, they don't judge it. They don't sit above it and criticize it. Rather, they engage it with a new narrative in order to create a better story. That's what God did at the beginning. That's what he did all through Scripture. That's what he's done in your life. And if we talk to enough people, we'll find that's what he did in their life too. Let's say it this way. Next slide. Number 4. Creators understand that everything belongs. We don't banish the disorder. We reorder it to make a more beautiful story. We reorder the disorder. Let me illustrate this with a story I heard from my friend Ben Staines, who pastors one of the great churches in New South Wales. I think it's a 11 campus church through all of rural New South Wales. I'm talking about Cobar and Narromine and Dubbo and Parkes and Forbes and Kiama and Wagga Wagga and Coffs Harbour. He's one of my best friends, and him and his wife are some of my heroes. And he's talking about the philosophy of Generosity Church, which is the name of their church. And he told me this story that was very moving. Evidently, this was back in the 90s. Just so you know, Americans are fascinated with Australian culture. If you want to make a lot of money, go to America and start any Australian-themed anything. We love it because of Crocodile Dundee. We love it. We think Australia is unbelievable. The first time I came to Australia and people were serious and they weren't trying to take the mickey out of you, they just didn't know. First time I come to Australia, they were like, do you have enough clothes with you? Do they have washing machines there? We didn't know, right? Americans are fascinated. We think all of Australia is the outback with kangaroos and big knives, and right? It was that, right? And so America, that's why Outback Steakhouse has made millions in America. Just by, all they did was name their steak after Australian towns. The Rockhampton ribeye, right? That's all they did. Alice Springs chicken. What are you talking about? The bloomin' onion, right? And actually, if you go and ask a waitress, where did the bloomin' onion came from? They will tell you that Aborigines invented it, right? And so, I'm pretty sure that is not true. So, but nonetheless, it's what they do. So Australians are fascinating to American culture. They love it. So this American came to Australia, and if you talk to any American who's never been here, the one thing Americans want to see, you would think Surfers Paradise, the Great Barrier Reef, you know, some of the mountain areas, Tamborine, anything, Bondi Beach, anything. No. Americans want to see the Outback. Why? Because of Outback Steakhouse, right? And because of Crocodile Dundee. What they don't understand is that there's nothing there, right? Listen, you drive 10 minutes out of Mount Isa. Well, you've seen it. You drive 10 more miles. It's just more of nothing. And then 10 more miles of nothing. That's what it is. So anyway, this American went to look at the Outback. And there was this cattle property out there. My pastor was a former cattleman, and his family owned a cattle property that was 70 miles long by 30 miles wide. Well, to Americans, that is the state of Connecticut, right? That is a state, right? 30 miles by 70 miles was their family's cattle property. And so the American went out and was just amazed at the sheer size of the thing. And what he couldn't work out is that in this one cattle property, there weren't fences around the whole thing. And the reason is you can't put fences around something that big. And so he got fascinated by this, and he asked the farmer, he said, how do you keep your cows with no fences? How do you keep your cows in the paddock if you don't have a fence? And the way the story goes is the farmer said, well, in a property this big, you can't do that. But what you do is you have a surveyor come in and you dig wells right down the middle of your property. And that's where the water source is. And so the cows won't venture too far from the water source because they know that they'll die. And he said, son, if you have proper wells, you don't need fences. And I thought, oh, now that story will preach, right? In other words, as creators, You don't need to create 97 rules of morality and who's in and who's out and who's right and who's wrong and who's clean and who's unclean. We've done that before. It was called the temple system that Jesus came to eradicate, right? You don't need 97 fence posts to decide who's in, who's out, who's right, who's wrong, who's clean, who's unclean. You don't need fences if you have enough genuine encounters with God. If there's a good enough well, the fence takes care of itself, right? In other words, if we take our role seriously of being creators, and this is our message to the world, come to us, all your disorder, as Billy Graham would have sung it, just as I am, all your disorder, your darkness, your chaos, your disrepair. We will not judge it. We will not criticize it. We will not set ourselves above it as we're in and you're out. Rather, we will engage it with you in order to make a better story. Why? Because God's a creator. And if God's a creator, then we are creators. And what do creators do? Creators do not sit above something and judge it, criticize it, and particularly under an anonymous screen name, just blindly hurt people. What creators do is when they see darkness, disrepair, and disorder, they engage it for the purpose of making a better story. So how do we be creators? Well, first, we have to make a commitment to be engagers of disorder instead of avoiders of it. We need to be people who engage disrepair instead of judging it. We need to be people who engage chaos instead of criticizing it. And we need to be people who are committed to using our energies to make the story better. That's what Jesus did in his entire ministry. He found chaos, darkness, disrepair, and disorder. And you never once see him taking someone in chaos, disrepair, and disorder and judging them or criticizing them or setting himself above them. What he did is he engaged their story and offered a better narrative. And some would call that good news. Now, here's the question then, so that this doesn't remain a platitude. How do we do that? Well, first, we have to decide to try our best to live within the character of God, to engage disorder, to bring a better story, to engage chaos, to bring new creation. That's what we do. But how did God do it? In Genesis 1, I see three things at least that God did in order to exercise his power as a creator. What does that mean? Someone who engages disorder to bring out order. It's not about being judgy or criticizing or blindly just setting ourselves above something. It's about being something that understands your authority to engage the disorder in order to make a better story. And when I look at Genesis 1, I see at least these three things about how we can do that. And if we mimic God in this, I think we could be creators as well. Next slide. All right, first is intentional vision. What you see in Genesis 1 is that God exercised an intentional vision. Now, what does that mean? That God sees the solution and is systematic in executing his vision. When he saw the void, he filled the void. It was a basic thing. Genesis 1, there's darkness. What fixes darkness? Light fixes darkness. Oh, there's a void of this, and so we'll create that. There's no clear boundaries between land and sea. Let's make that happen, right? And so what you see is you see an ability to clearly see the void, clearly see the solution, and then be intentional about executing that vision. Let's put some more language around that. Now, all of this means the same thing, but I realize that some people over here might pick up on one thing, some people over here might pick up on another. And so if I say it enough ways, everybody gets in on it, right? So let's say it this way. Our yes must be clear. What we're saying yes to must be clear. As a matter of fact, I would say that our life must be driven by the yes and never by the no. No, in and of itself, is never a powerful enough motivator for long-term change. It can make short-term change, much like fear or guilt. Fear or guilt are great short-term motivators. If you want to get a great altar call and get people to make a short-term 2-day change, make them feel real guilty or make them feel real scared, and they will shift short-term. But they're great short-term motivators, but horrible long-term motivators. Same thing with the no response. What we abstain from is never powerful enough to maintain a life change over a long period of time. It's always what we're saying yes to. I'll give you an example. Weight loss. To say no to too much food never works long term. We have to say yes to a certain lifestyle. That's two different things. Spending is another thing. To say no to frivolous spending never creates long-term change, but to say yes to financial security does. The yes response is always more powerful than the no response. But here's the thing. Our yes must be the driving force of all of our no responses. In other words, good-hearted people will wrestle with when is saying no being selfish, right? And if you're a good-hearted person, you've wrestled with that. When I want to say no to this, but am I being selfish if I do? And if you've never wrestled with that question, you might be a sociopath, right? The idea is that when we're just saying no willy-nilly with no thought of, should I help that person or not, if you don't consider this question, there's a problem. But here's the truth, is that all of us at times, good-hearted people, wonder and wrestle, is this no actually being selfish? And let me give you a good litmus test as to when it's not. When you're saying no, because that no is clearly backed up by some other yes. That I'm saying no to this, not because I'm saying no, but because I've said yes to something else, then that yes must require that I say no to that. I'll give you an example. To say no to eating the entire cake is only important because you've said yes to limiting your calories to a certain point to maintain fitness. To say no to something is best described as when we say yes to something else. Maybe I can say it another way. Next slide. Let's say it this way. One yes requires 1,000 no responses. One yes requires 100, maybe 1,000 no responses, right? So to say yes to being a person of forgiveness, which is a good thing, requires that we say no to grudge holding. But just to say, I'm never going to hold a grudge, that can't work. To say I'm never going to hold a grudge doesn't work unless it's attached to, I'm saying yes to being a person of forgiveness and peace. To be a yes person on financial security means I must say no to frivolous spending. I must say no for a season to spending $6 for a cup of coffee. I got to. I can't pay $6 twice a day for a cup of coffee. I can't do that. Even if they give me a discount to $5, that's $10 a day for a cup of coffee. That is $300 a month to make urine. It doesn't work for my financial security. To say no to this is being driven by a yes here. To be a yes person on family connection might mean I need to say no to too many extra family activities. But saying no just for no's sake doesn't have the power of what it means to say, no, I'm saying no to joining your pickup basketball league because I've said yes to being at my son's basketball game. That has oomph to it. To say yes here means 100 no's there. But no in and of itself doesn't help us. Which leads me to this question. Are we clear on what we want our organization or our family or our ministry or whatever we're talking about? Are we clear as to what we want that to look like? Like, think about what you're leading or where you're influencing. Have you got a clear vision? You see a void. You have a clear picture of what that void would look like filled. And then you have a clear systemic work that says, okay, for that void to be filled with that yes, it requires this many yeses, which requires this many no's. Have we even thought through it? Or are we trying to live life on accident? What you find in Genesis 1 is that living without intention guarantees failure. In other words, let me say it another way. You don't have to try to fail. You just have to have no intention, and failure becomes a normal part of your existence, right? So, in other words, you do not have to try to be broke. You don't. You just have to have no financial plan, and brokenness will overtake you, right? You don't have to try. You don't have to try to be unfit, right? You don't. You don't have to intend. You don't have to wake up in the morning and go, I am going to intentionally eat too many calories for my body today. And I'm going to do that day after day after day after day after day. And one day, unfitness will overtake me. No, you don't have to do that. You just have to have no fitness plan, and unfitness will overtake you. You don't have to plan to be a bad dad. You don't. You don't. You don't have to wake up and intend to be a bad dad. You just have to have no intention of being a great dad, and the stuff bad dads do will overtake you. In other words, when we live life on accident, failure becomes a normal part of our experience, right? What you see in Genesis 1 is no accidents. What you see is void, solution. I'm going to be intentional about my vision to do that, which leads me to this. Is there alignment between our questions and our stated values? So, if you're a parent, or if you're a boss, or if you work with some people, let me tell you what the studies show. This is just straight social science. The studies show that trust goes up, anxiety goes down, and corporate confidence increases when there's an alignment between what we say is important and the questions we ask. Let me say it another way. When the questions we ask and the stories we tell the same story, trust goes up, anxiety goes down, corporate confidence increases. Which leads me to this question. Let me talk to you parents for a second. Do you want trust to go up in your house or down? And do you want anxiety to go up in your house or down? And do you want confidence in your family structure to go up or down? I hope the answer to all three of those things is up, down, up, right? We want trust to go up, anxiety to go down, corporate confidence to increase. The main thing that makes that happen is when there's an alignment between what we say is important and the questions we ask. The studies show that when we say something that's important and then we ask a question that violates that in our children, their anxiety goes up, their trust goes down, their confidence goes down. Let me give you an example. So, let's say you look into the dining room and your third grader is in there studying for a test. And he's quite a perfectionist. He's the A type, you know? Like getting a B is the worst thing ever, right? And he's stressing over this test. And you could see it. And you're like, oh. And you say, hey, buddy, what are you doing? Studying for my test, Mom. Studying for my test. And you say, don't worry about the test. All I want you to do is do your best, right? That's your stated value. Do your best. Well, the next day, you pick him up from school. He gets in the car, and you say to him, did you do your best? Well, then the question you asked and the statement you made is the same story. Confidence goes up, trust goes up, anxiety goes down. But if he gets in the car and you say, what grade did you make? Well, then the stated value and the question value tell a different story. Trust goes down, anxiety goes up, and confidence goes down. When we're doing anything in creation, let me explain. When we're engaging disorder with order, when we're engaging chaos with new creation, when we're engaging darkness with light, when we're engaging it, we have to make sure that trust goes up, anxiety goes down, corporate confidence increases. How do we do that? Is we're intentional about our vision. Our yes is driven by no, our no's are driven by yeses, and our yes requires 1,000 no's, and our stated values and the questions we ask line up. Which leads me to this. Do the questions you ask and the stories you tell reveal and reinforce what you actually feel are important? And if we do that, then anxiety goes down, trust goes up, corporate confidence increase. This is how we be creators, is with intentional vision. Next slide. The second thing is intentional words. So what I find is, in Genesis 1, is that God was quite disciplined in making sure that his words and his vision never were ambiguous against one another. So let's ask a few questions about this. Is there alignment between our vision and the words we allow to be spoken? The issue is almost never right or wrong. Like if you want to ruin your life, have the only gauge you ever consider, is this right or wrong? Right or wrong is a terrible filter if it's the, and let me be clear about this. Right or wrong is a terrible filter if it's the only filter, right? And we shouldn't forget that. It's the first lie recorded. First lie recorded in the Bible, we should remember it because evidently it was told by a talking snake. Listen, when a talking snake tells a lie, pay attention to it. And the lie was, your best life can be found in mastering right and wrong, good and evil. If you just master what is good and what is evil, that's your best life. That is not true. Why? Because there's a lot of things that aren't wrong, but they're not wise. There's a lot of things that aren't technically wrong, but they don't fit into your yeses. There's a lot of things that aren't wrong, but they don't fit in what God's called us to do. The question isn't, is this right or wrong? The question is this wise or is this useful? What sort of verbiage do we allow to be spoken? One of the things, and I hope it's embarrassed you, because it's definitely embarrassed me, one of the things that's really embarrassed me in this season is watching Christians carry on the internet with no relationship, no engagement, and no commitment to being a part of the solution, just absolutely ranting about the things that are wrong. This is not good. This is not good, because what you don't see in those things is intentional vision. You don't see yeses that lead to nos. You don't see no's driven by yeses. You don't see a commitment to align questions and stories and statements. You don't see, what you almost feel is we're above this, and we're not above this. We're actually in the middle of it with everybody else. It's about words. It's about vision. See, let's say it this way. In the last 30 days, what has dominated our confessions? In the last 30 days, what have we rationalized coming out of our mouth? And I'm not talking about denying the truth. I'm talking about when it comes to, by faith, believing for this, this, and this. There's a problem, here's a solution. This is what's missing. We're going to believe God for these things. We're going to call those things that are not as though they are. We're going to draw on some faith. We're going to build some desire in ourselves. We're going to let that desire get red hot. We're going to speak it with our mouth, because we think it, we feel it, we say it, we do it. That's how people do things. We think it, we feel it, we say it, we do it. We think it, we feel it, we say it, we do it. Have we matched our words with what we think we want? Because when there's a misalignment with what we think we want to the words we're saying, anxiety is going to go up, trust is going to go down, corporate confidence is going to decrease. So what I see in Genesis 1 is intentional vision, intentional words. Next slide. I also see intentional rest. So there seems to be a 6-in-1 rhythm built into creating something. One of the things that makes God masterful is evidently God knows when to be on and when to be off. When to create, dream, go for it, be proactive, and when to take a deep breath and just be and enjoy where he is. You also see this in Jesus. There's this one of my favorite stories about Jesus is in Mark 5. And it says that he was at someone's house, and someone brought him a demon-possessed person, and he threw the demon out of the person, and the person was given relief after a long period of time. And so that person ran and told people, and before he knew it, the house was full of, because look, when you throw one demon out, get ready, because they're all going to show up. And it says that he spent all night with demon-possessed people. Because when you want to ruin a party, right? When you want to talk about an energizing group of folks, let's just hang out all night with the demon-possessed, right? And it says that he just, one at a time, ministered to them. And it says that Jesus realized before he went to sleep that the next day it was going to be worse. So here's what he did. Before the sun got up, he went off. Let's call that 4 a.m. He goes off to a solitary place to be by himself with him and his Father and pray. And of course, when the sun comes up, the crowd is unbelievable. And Peter evidently knows where Jesus' spot is, you know. And it says that Jesus, he went and got, and in this sense, Peter almost sounds condescending to Christ, you know. And he says something like this. He says, Jesus, what are you doing, man? Don't you know that everybody is waiting on you? And Jesus says, really? Everyone's waiting on me? Then let us go somewhere else. I want to be somewhere they're not. Even Jesus knew when to engage the disorder and when it was time to be an effective creator, to disengage for a day, recharge, and then go again. It seems like there was intentional vision and intentional words, but there was also intentional rest. Let's say it this way. Too much engagement leads to white noise and confusion. Too much engagement leads to white noise and confusion. I would also say this, not enough engagement leads to depression and boredom, right? So someone says, I'm a little depressed. If I say, why? And they say, well, I lost my mother and I just got a bad report from this and my job's not going well. Well, I go, well, you have a reason to be depressed. Let's talk through those things, right? But if someone says, I'm a bit depressed, and I go, why? And they go, I don't know. I don't know why I'm depressed. I just have, nothing bad's going on. I just feel depressed. Almost always, those people don't have enough engagement with being a part of the solution, and they're finding themselves bored in their own company. That's what's happening. But too much engagement leads to high anxiety. Not enough engagement leads to boredom and depression. What you find in Genesis 1 is God knew when to engage and when to disengage. This is true. Let me see if I can illustrate this with music, right? I like good music. I understand if it sounds good. I understand if it sounds bad. That's the limit of my musical knowledge. I'm not good at music. And honestly, on American Idol or Australian Idol, I can tell when they're not going to make it, and I can tell, oh, they're going to make it. But once it gets to the final rounds, and it's the difference between a 9.5 and a 9.7, I can't hear the difference, all right? But here's what I do know about music. Music is made up of notes. Woo, ready? Right? Music is also, and I checked this with a musician, music is made up of rests. So in music, you have notes and you have rest. That's first. Second, what I also know about music is this. You could have the best singer in Bundaberg standing here, next to the best guitar player, next to the best piano player, next to the best bass player, and none of that matters if the drummer's awful. None of it matters, right? Because we've all been in church long enough to see that happen, where the musicians are playing the right note in the right key all together, but the drummer is just a little bit off, and there's this awkward, right? And at that moment, there is no such thing as a musician that's good enough to overcome that. You have to stop the song and start over, right? Because you can't overcome a bad drummer. And here's what happens in our life. What happens is we start feeling like we're spinning our wheels in our life, and our first thought is what am I doing wrong? In other words, am I playing it in the wrong key? But sometimes you are. And if we're playing the wrong key, we need to change keys. But if we find ourselves not playing the wrong notes, the second question should be, am I in the wrong rhythm? Have I lost my engagement or disengagement? Have I lost my rhythm? Because see, what would happen is could you imagine a song being played where all the musicians ignored the rests? You only see that once in a song, and that's at the end of a fast song going into another fast song, and it's called a crash bang. This is, if you don't know what that is when everybody on the whole stage is playing everything in the right key, all on, all the time. And it's really cool because it's a cue that this song is over and the next song is fixing to start. But how long is it cool for? 5 seconds? 10 seconds? Can you imagine going to a concert and they held a crash bang for a full minute? At what point would it be hard on the ears? And that's what happens to our life. Even if we're on the right notes in the right key, if we're all on all the time, our life gets filled with white noise and confusion, and it gets very hard to listen to. Actually, for creators, we have to master intentional vision, intentional words, and intentional rest, because when we're out of rhythm, it butchers our song. When we're out of rhythm, it butchers our song. Next slide. Couple questions, because good teaching is not meant to be agreed with, nor disagree, although I've said literally nothing even remotely controversial tonight, that we are made in the image of God, and God is a creator, and he has called us to act as creators in our world. Not arguable, right? The question is, what does that mean? Well, it means to have an attitude not above the disorder, not to judge it, but actually to engage it, to bring out a better story. Why? Because that's what God does. How does he do it? Intentional vision. Yeses that drive no's. Yeses that require no's. No's that are driven by yeses. Alignment between questions and stories and words, and holding ourselves accountable to our confession, and rhythm. So what can we do with this? Let's ask a few questions to wrestle with this for application. 1, are the people we are leading frustrated by the gap between stated values and questions? I don't know the answer to that. Only you can know. Or if you're leading a family, is the frustration you're feeling with your children actually a gap between your stated values and the values revealed by questions and stories? Is there any frustration there? And all you can do is examine that, wrestle with that. Go to coffee with a friend who'll tell you the truth. Number 2, how can we help them decrease their anxiety? The people we're trying, if we're trying to engage a disordered story to bring order, well, you have to decrease anxiety. You have to increase trust, and you have to increase confidence. How do we do that? Intentional vision, intentional words, and intentional rest. Alignment between our stated values, our actual values, and the questions we ask and the stories we tell. Number 3, in our organization, have we been clear about what we value? So whatever you're leading, so if I wrote this, I use that word because it's general. If you're leading a church, do your people, if you're in ministry leadership in this church, do the people on your ministry team actually get it? If you ask them, what are we actually all about? Do they get it? Or is there an obvious gap between it? Next slide. Are we too compromising with our words and confessions? I am. I caught myself in the last couple weeks allowing myself to be too compromised with what I was letting come out of my mouth about certain situations. I knew what I was saying wasn't helpful. It wasn't adding to the problem, but it surely wasn't solving it. You had to step back. I had to step back and go, wait a minute, hang on. I got to repent from that. And I don't mean repent as a shame-based activity. I mean to change the way I'm thinking about this and only behave in a way that brings order to the disorder, new creation to the chaos, to bring a new, better story. Are we too compromising with our words and confessions? Let's say it this way. Do they create order or disorder? Not are they right or wrong, because we always think we're right when we say it. You've never said anything that at the time you said it, you went, I'm wrong, but I'm going to say it anyway. Nobody's ever done that, unless you're sort of a psychopath. Like, I had a teacher in high school who, she said, I encourage debate and wrestling. Great, right? And we're talking about a piece of literature, and I chose to take her on. And I painted her, this might surprise you, but I've always been a fairly good debater, you know? Like, I've always been fairly articulate. And I painted her in a corner in front of everybody. But let me keep in mind, she encouraged this behavior. But when she got painted in a corner, a different value sprung up. And she could think of nothing to say. So she said, Shane Willard, you think you're always right. To which I said, when's the last time you thought you were wrong? And she sent me to the principal's office. Listen, we always think, so when we're talking about compromising words, the question isn't, well, this is right or this is wrong. The question is this wise or useful? We always think we're right when we say it. Let me say it this way. Sixth question, is my song out of rhythm? If my life is a song and I've done the work to go, am I playing my notes in the right key? Right notes, right key, right notes, right key. In other words, intentional vision, intentional words. I'm not engaging disrepair with more disrepair. Is my life out of rhythm? Have I misjudged the balance between too much engagement and disengagement? Maybe you've been on the too much engagement side and you need to discipline yourself to take a Sabbath every now and then. Or maybe you've been too much on the disengagement side and you're finding yourself bored and calling it depression. Either way, it's not a right or wrong issue. It's a rhythm issue. Maybe we could think of it this way. Next slide. Am I a well digger or a fence maker? Have I organized my faith in fence making? Right, wrong, in, out, clean, unclean, which just means I agree or disagree with your moral preference. Where have we tried to engage other people's disorder with just more fences? Which doesn't work. When we actually should be well diggers. Well diggers say, you know what? I'm going to engage your chaotic, disordered, disrepaired story, and we're going to create an experience with the divine that will engage that story and make a better story. If you're a well digger, you don't need to be a fence maker because the well keeps the cattle on the paddock. So may we be those people. I bless you, my brothers and sisters, to be creators, to engage the disorder, the chaos, and the disrepair for a better story. I bless you to know that you're never beyond the grace of God, that God's not judging your life, your disorder, your disrepair, your chaos. He's offering to engage it in order to make a better story. Would you consent and say yes to that? And may we be that in our world with intentional vision, intentional words, and intentional rest. May we be well diggers and never fence makers. Until I see you guys tomorrow, grace and peace, everybody. God bless.
Thank you, Shane. Hey, amazing. I really enjoyed that. Challenged by some of the thoughts. We're going to exit through the side doors. There are white buckets here for any giving you'd like to give for Shane. What we're going to do as a church is whatever comes in those offering buckets on the way out tonight, we're going to match that and put that into the table. So whatever you put in there, we're going to match that from the church and put that onto the table. So we're looking after those orphanages with Shane. So on your way out, Shane's table's out there. God bless you all, and empty the building, and we'll start cleaning it ready for the next group. God bless.